It's my great pleasure to welcome Steve Hatch, VP for Northern Europe for Facebook, no less, to the show this morning. Morning, Steve.
Good morning, Mark. Great to be here.
Great to have you on. And just to give you a bit of an intro for everybody, I'm sure you're very well known, but nonetheless, Steve's had an incredible career. He grew up as a planner across a number of agencies, including DDB, PhD, Y&R, moved into a managing director role at Media Edge before becoming CEO at MEC. And that was the first time our paths crossed, Steve. It was a pitch, unsuccessful for MEC at that point in time. But
we should go into that.
Yeah, WPP retained the business through media. So we'll move on from that. Then, of course, I think back in about 2014, Steve moved to be director for UK and Ireland initially, but is now currently VP for Northern Europe, as I said. So massive job, clearly very much in the limelight. And Steve has said he's very happy to take whatever questions anybody's got. You know, Facebook are never far from the spotlight. But despite this, Steve's a very humble guy, very understated guy, and that will come across. So we're going to get an inside track into a glittering career in agency land and Facebook specifically, but also the person behind the name, what makes Steve tick, which includes the fact that Steve is dyslexic and has no qualms in talking about that. And I've heard Steve talk about that very eloquently. Both in terms of the good and the bad that brings. So sit back and relax, but not too much, because we want your questions as ever. And Steve, absolutely fabulous to have you on the show.
Thank you, Mark. And great to meet you as well, Ritchie.
You too as well.
Over to you, Ritchie, to get us started.
Hey, thank you, Mark. And good morning, Steve. Steve, look, it's an absolute privilege to have you on with us this morning, and really looking forward to this conversation and diving into some of these key great topics. But look, let's start easy on you. Now, clearly, there's been lots of change over the last year. So I'd just love to hear from your perspective, how's that been, both work and life, as they call it?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a year, more than a year now, like no other for all of us. And, certainly thinking about 2021, it's felt quite like a continuation of 2020. And it almost feels like we're in like month 18 of clearly what has been such a transformative moment for the world, for companies and for people. You find me today, and I'll just be very open about this, you find me today feeling actually really pretty happy because I'm going to see my parents for the first time in quite a while, and they're going to see their grandkids for the first time since August. So even just saying that, I'm feeling very emotional about that. That said, I mean, specifically, if we think about the last really 18 months from a business perspective in particular, what we've seen is this extraordinary kind of great pull forward, that the trends that were emerging prior to the pandemic have been incredibly accelerated. And in many ways, when I'm talking to companies and organizations, the ones that are thriving right now are the ones that took their 10-year view on the world and have pulled it forward to make it the reality now. And we see that coming through in data. So Benedict Evans, who is certainly one of the people that I follow quite a lot on trends, his perspective, and this is UK data, but I think we're seeing this around the world, where we've seen essentially 15 years of e-commerce channel shift occur in 9 months. So if you strip out grocery, we're seeing the UK, it's now 40% of total commerce is now e-commerce, and that's extraordinary. So the big question I think we're all asking ourselves is, what's next? What's next for us as companies? What's next for us as a society? What's next for us as people? And that's for whether you're a business, large or small, or a person. So personally right now, feeling quite buoyant because I'm looking forward to the weekend and really thinking, what does this great pull forward really mean? And potentially on top of that, what does the prospect of a great unlock look like? And what does that mean for us in businesses and helping businesses to support and grow? Now, of course, many people are finding deep challenges at an economic level, but on the other hand as well, we're seeing the highest level of saving rates in around the world in global history right now. So with over, I believe it's something along the lines of over 2.7 trillion dollars are now resting in savings, and the pent-up desire for people to re-emerge back into the world in a different form is clearly there for businesses to take up. But it does come with new responsibilities, I would say. And I think those areas over the past year where sustainability, the social awakening that we've seen, and particularly the global reckoning since the death of George Floyd and the rise of the Black Lives Matter protests, and the social responsibilities that company has. So I feel my nature is to be naturally optimistic, and I do feel we're going to be entering in a potentially more positively disruptive period over the next 18 months because of the response to the pandemic that we've had and this experience that we've all been through. I guess sort of finally, I didn't expect my daughter's art desk, which is what I'm using here, to be my permanent home when I sat down here on March 20th last year, but I've got used to that.
Yeah, lovely. I love that thought of unlock, and specifically the conversations around diversity, inclusion, climate, equality, and inclusion. Have had some oxygen. So there are some silver linings, but it's also been tough. So I want to just dig a little bit deeper in terms of what are some of the things that you feel you've missed, and what have been some of your silver linings for you personally, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, at a personal level, that it's such an obvious thing to say, but just missing the contact with friends and family. It is the kind of freedom that you had to just be together or casually, not have to plan too much, and the amount of kind of planning and rigor that's been. I've really, really missed that. I've missed being face to face with colleagues. I think I'm sure I can't be alone in going through phases where this experience has felt like a novelty and quite enjoyable at some periods, and actually at sometimes really, really hard. Particularly, I've got 2 children. I feel lucky that they are teenagers, so they've been able to some extent look after themselves more. I honestly do not know how anyone with young children has been able to really do any type of work in this. I'm deeply respectful and impressed by anybody that's had to manage homeschooling on top of work that was there. So all of those things are kind of pretty obvious in terms of the things I'm missing. I think the other thing is that in terms of the silver linings is, although we've been physically distant, I don't think I've ever felt closer or more open with people, certainly when it comes to my team. And I've mentioned the word optimism already in this, and it is my natural nature to be, I guess, sort of Tiggerish. But what I discovered about myself in leadership in this period is that whilst that is an advantage often, I found what the limits of optimism are. If that optimism is preventing me really demonstrating when I'm finding things hard myself. We had a fire here during this in my house during the period, a small one, not too dangerous, but the anxiety, it was in my daughter's bedroom, and the anxiety that triggered became really hard for us to manage as a family. And what I found is the more I was able to share with my team the things that I'm finding hard, the easier it was and the closer we are. So I think there's a real lesson in leadership that, yes, you need to be able to look ahead and look forward and be able to drive and motivate and inspire people. But you have to do that through the authenticity of your real lived experience.
Wow. Steve, that's really struck with me. And I love the phrase that you just coined in, the limits of optimism. And I think quite often, we look at leaders as the ultimate sort of rah-rah people and constantly needing to, push forward and not be, not kind of almost hide and kind of cuddle the team to not see some of those realities. And I love the way that you've sort of debusted and debunked that quite a lot, which is really nice. I want to go back to the point around unlocking. I think that was really interesting. But rather than taking it from your perspective, I want you to maybe put yourself into the shoes of your teenage kids. And clearly you've come from a vantage point of Facebook and, the dominance that the tech industry has kind of now prevailed over young people and young people's lives and perspectives. And then clearly now coming in with the pandemic on the other side. I would just love to get your perspective on whether you feel optimistic or pessimistic for what the role of society is for young people in the years to come, given those various
the role of young people and technology. I suppose the two of them are very closely related.
And whether you are feeling particularly optimistic or pessimistic for for your teenage kids who are about to kind of immerse themselves into this world, almost already, but themselves more into this world.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I want to caveat this up front by saying I'm not the person, I think, to decide whether we think we've reached a point of equality or evenness or kind of openness. That should be decided not by me as a, frankly, these days a middle class, but probably not always. But I certainly have always been a white man in a society for whom the systems of this country benefit. So I think there is I caveat my response with, I can only give it from that perspective, and the people that should decide whether we've reached a good point aren't me. They should be those people that have been more marginalized, less heard, less understood, and less represented. Having said all of that, I actually feel I do feel credibly optimistic for the future, and that we're seeing young people create. I think there is the sense of connection. Some of it, I have to say, created by technology. Their perspective on the world is so much wider than I ever had. Their lived experience is so much greater and has more breadth than it ever had. I don't think this comes without challenges, but they're quite different challenges to the one I felt that I grew up in. And their sense of connection, the sense of wanting to do the right thing, the sense of campaigning spirit. And we see on Facebook and Instagram the percentage of young people who feel that they are heard through those channels that they have access to, that they're able to create campaigns around the things that are most important to them. And that can be a huge range of topics, whether that's from period poverty, which I've met with a number of people that are extremely focused on that, through to of course the rise of Black Lives Matter. And I took part in a socially distanced demonstration in Brighton, which is near where I live, in the middle of the surge of the Black Lives Matter. It was incredibly powerful, to be there, to see across that seafront 2 miles of socially distant people stood in silence and in solidarity. And of course, they were all ages there. But that was an event that was organized through a Facebook group and Facebook events. And the application of that technology to drive social change and social good and social justice, I feel very, very positive about. I'm very proud of the role that we have. And I don't want to be naive about it, but I do feel optimistic of the future that young people can have. And the difference, because of the difference they can make, because they have voice in a way that I don't think would have been true even a few short years ago.
Yeah, that's very true. My kids are 15 and 19, and all the norms are completely different. We'll probably come back to that, but I do want to go all the way back, just really to understand how the hell you got into the advertising industry, and what was your big break?
Oh, thank you. That it sort of feels so long ago. I'm also well aware that in the opening I said it was going to be brilliant, and he's very humble. So that gives me it gives me a really narrow spot to work within, Mark. But I'll do my best. Mark mentioned at the very beginning of this that I'm dyslexic, and I just want to be really clear. I am proudly dyslexic. I think it brings enormous benefits and skills and advantages, and I'm happy to share with anybody the part of the EY report onto the value of dyslexia in the workplace, and I've been sharing that kind of widely. So happy to do that after this as well, perhaps kind of sharing the link. But I found school hard, frankly, but I didn't face up to it. I want to be clear as well. I was offered support, but I just didn't take it up. And I think that was probably embarrassment or a sense of kind of social stigma, or not wishing to, I could have identify as having what I then perceived as a disadvantage. And so I used to tell this story that I applied to get jobs in advertising, and I was offered a job, and then I left college to take it up. It's not quite true. I was told that if I skipped one more lesson, then I'd be thrown out. So I left, and I went to a careers office and said I want to be an actor in journalism or in advertising. And I really, really did want to do advertising out of all of those, because I saw it as this thrilling blend of art and commerce, and kind of try and reconcile these kind of two interests that I had. And 2 weeks later, I got a call to go and be a trainee account manager. Can you believe me, an account manager? But at a local agency, and I got that job. And the biggest difference that was made to me then is I had an extraordinary female mentor, a woman called Kathy Jones, who was the head of media in that agency. And even these days, there are, I think everybody knows, there are agencies outside of the center cities that are extremely good, certainly not a second class, like incredibly powerful, strong agencies in cities all over the UK and other countries as well. But at that time, they were often staffed by people who moved from London to make a lifestyle change. And I was really great. I got to work with her, and she said, "Look, if you're going to do this job properly, you need to go to London." And fortunately, I did. I worked and then I went and became a media planner at Initiative. Then went to work at BMP, which is what is now Adam and Eve DDB, a full service creative agency. And I feel very, very lucky for two bits of accidental timing that I had. One, I'm young enough to have grown up with computers, but old enough also to be able to understand the kind of full world of full service advertising. Now, and I know that that's not a usual position to have, but I learned so much there. So that was the big break. It was Fortune. It was, but led by, I think I was lucky that I had a lot of energy and a lot of drive, and I wanted to succeed. I couldn't quite find my voice, and I felt very lucky that a number of people in my career have said, okay, well, let's take a risk. And I think that speaks a lot to what the School of Marketing is trying to do in terms of like really helping to open up the opportunities that are there, and really to understand that these risks aren't risks. If you're betting on a ambitious, hungry, smart person, like, please have a broad perspective about what they might look like and who they might be. More to go into on that, but that was a break point.
Steve, first of all, thank you. You're absolutely bang on, with the risks that we all take in life in order to kind of see our journeys through in whatever guises. What really struck with me is that piece of advice that Kathy gave you, and it's certainly something that I've kind of held close to my heart when she said, you've got to go to London. The power of London for me, for many, many years, has been something that's been really strongly resonant. And I've stuck around in this great old city, living in cupboards and shoeboxes, on the basis that I believe in the power of London and what it can bring. And so I'm glad that, that's something that sort of stayed with me as well.
I know that shoebox moment. I lodged in a room where I was in a sofa bed that was just narrowly wide, just wider than the room. So yeah, I know that moment.
Well, so Steve, I want to pick up on the thought around mentoring and mentorship. Now, clearly that's had a massive role in your life. And I mean, Facebook being probably one of the most coveted places in the world to work. Love to get a bit of an inside scoop into how you guys see the role of mentoring, the culture that you're trying to engender within the organization. And then that, of course, the impact that you believe that then has on people that are currently working then come through your space.
Yeah, absolutely. And in Facebook, I mean, one the attractions to me when I originally joined 7 years ago was, and it's even more now, was the diversity of people that I would be working with, like the sheer breadth that's there. And now, as a company, we've got very ambitious targets. So globally, we've set a goal for at least 50% of our growing, very rapidly growing, I would say, as well, kind of, workforce to come from underrepresented groups. And there's kind of like broad definitions around what that looks like. So we're very clear on the targets, and that makes sense. When you're building products for the world, you want to have the broadest possible number of people that you can have that can create better products. There's lots of work on design for inclusion and those types of things that we're working on. And the kindred philosophy that sits within Facebook at a people level is one of playing to strengths. You are encouraged to do the things that you love to do and the unique attributes that you have. And one of the things that I didn't understand about Facebook before I went there was you can be one of two things at Facebook. You can be an IC or you can be a manager. And an IC is an individual contributor. And this was a revelation to me, frankly, coming from the world of advertising. And the other underpinning part of that philosophy is management is not a promotion. So that the managing of people or the running of teams is seen as an individual skill, not necessarily a hierarchical one. And being an IC, like the ability to contribute as an individual, as a person, is equally valued as much as the attribute of being able to lead teams. And that comes through in kind of levels and conversation and all those kind of like critical systems that kind of that under structures, rather I should say, that underpin all of those. And that makes so much sense. When you've got, I used to use an example of a guy called Lars who works at Facebook. He and his brother, they created amazing products like Google Maps in their garage. So do you want that? It turns out he's an amazing manager as well, so he's a bad example. But but do you want that person managing people? You want someone with those skills who really wants to go and build products. Do you want them to spend their time managing people? Maybe. But you really want them to be able to thrive and succeed through the things that they do brilliantly. This was quite a revelation to me in what had previously been something I hadn't been able to crack, which is how do you reward and propel people through the organization without necessarily having that associated with the number of people that are reporting to them. And that creates an environment of in a way, kind of a battle of ideas, of intellectual inclusion, and of course, kind of mentorship that goes with that. I currently mentor 2 people from underrepresented groups, because there are definitely specific challenges that people, particularly in the people of Black heritage, face in succeeding in this country. And I think it's kind of pretty sure to say that's kind of true of countries around the world as well. So the role that I think where I see the role of a mentor, which is placing a specific focus where you think you can make the biggest difference. That's how I think about my role as a mentor. And equally, where I think I'm going to get great learning as well. And that's the in a way, the exchange that's changed over the past couple of decades, which is, it's an incredible time to come in as a young person into industries like marketing or technology and advertising, because you have a depth of understanding that probably the people that are running the organization might not have, because of the generation they've grown. So that mutual benefit of mentor and mentee, I think, is even greater today than it's ever been.
So just to flip that one round, you've mentored and inspired others. How do you stay fresh, stay grounded? Where do you get your personal mentorship and inspiration in the other direction?
Yeah, I think maybe it's because I don't have a degree, so I've still got this a chip on my shoulder about not having that. So and what that's meant is I've got this constant desire to keep learning, and constant desire to continue. I didn't get the set period in life where you do that, so I feel that's kind of continued. And for me, I have 2 mentors that are actually completely outside of the industry that I go to, and that I seek their advice and guidance and wisdom. And what I've tried to do more, Mark, actually, is to also make sure that I'm immersing myself in different media, different recommendations, as I'm trying to broaden my knowledge of what the lived experience of people is in my team. And I've mentioned what I said before, particularly those people of Black heritage, where that's the awakening I feel I've gone through over the last 12 months, is just really to understand more. And that, one of the mentee-mentor relationships I have, I genuinely believe it is a reverse process, or certainly a process of equals learning from each other. And the other source is, I have people that, I don't know, do you have these as well? People that, like, they don't know they're your mentor, but you think they are. So whether I'm kind of inspired or kind of listen to others.
Yeah, just on that one, I think I might have mentioned it many shows ago. Actually, this is our 40th show, Steve. So great!
Congratulations! Fantastic.
But yeah, the M word is sometimes quite loaded. So I like to. There's a little line I use, which is, I saw you did a great presentation. I'd love to learn about how you prepared for it. Can I buy you a coffee, or can I have a 15-minute Zoom? And at no point have I mentioned the M word. But what I'm doing is asking something about something that they're good about, that it's effortless to them, and will speak happily, and it's no big deal. But it is mentoring, because in the end, mentoring is is only advice. But anyway, I'll hand to.
Well, I can say, sorry, just to build on that one. I got very lucky early on in my time at WPP that of working and having Jeremy Bullmore as someone that I could go and talk to and speak to with a degree of frequency. I co-wrote a book with a guy called Jim Taylor on connections planning and brand planning, and that came from exactly that, Mark, of just actually going, I'm blown away by this person's mind and their grace and their intellect just from reading their material. So to be able to say, could we get a moment? And I'm curious for you, Mark, but I've never had anybody say no to that request. But
100% strike rate, because it's if people are being flattered and being asked to talk about something which is their specialist subject, it may take, so for example, somebody very junior in our team really wanted to speak to Karen Blackett. Karen said yes. I don't know when, but yes. And it was 3 months, but it happened.
Yeah. Right.
So I think it's, I'm 100% strike rate. So, yeah.
I guess fun thing I'll say is to anyone, if you haven't listened to Jeremy Bullmore's, they're now, I suppose I can talk about alternative podcasts, but his talks and are available as podcasts. They are extraordinary. They really are beautiful and they are better to listen to because his voice is quite something too.
By the way, gents, I'm going to completely put you on the spot, and given that you've talked about people not saying no, clearly you guys have a responsibility to not say no either. Hint, hint to the audience. Just kind of moving on that. By the way, I just love the thought and the fact that you actually didn't decide to go down a normal career path, just the normal kind of milk round degree kind of route, but still were able to achieve some amazing lofty heights in where you are today, Steve, if I may say so. And I think that really is coming as an inspiration where a lot of young people today are really sort of deliberating about where they see the role of formal education at that stage in their lives. I think that's, a big question mark there, particularly given the sacrifices of experience that the traditional experience of university no longer exists. And a lot of them are experiencing it on Zoom, which is quite tragic, to be honest with you. I'm now speaking to a young person last week, and they literally had to make virtual friends on Zoom in the hope that some point in the future they could have a coffee with them. It just feels like the whole
crazily tough, isn't it? Crazily tough.
Really, really is challenging. But I do admire the fact that, if people are going through that right now, there is an alternative. There are other ways out there, and clearly you can see, someone come out the other side and just being super inspirational. But I'm gonna stop at that, kind of humbling you there. I actually want to come on to a slightly more controversial question. So you have obviously seen The Social Dilemma on Netflix. I would like to ask, do you see it as a social dilemma?
I have seen it, and I probably won't do my full review and unpicking at this point. But what I would say is that the topic of technology and society is one as old as society and technology, but two, actually a really important one to have and a really important debate to discuss. I think that certainly the limits are often the pieces that make the headlines, and I think there is a big responsibility that all companies have, technology companies in particular, to make sure that their services are being used positively, that where there are aspects of harmful content that they're taken down and removed. And just to paint to give that some background and some backbone, if I look at what Facebook's done, and it's reflective of what we also see in the broader industry as well. If you'd have gone back a few short years ago, the way that content was moderated on Facebook would have been almost 100% community moderation. So that would have been people flagging to Facebook that we don't think this should be on the platform. Now, what I would say is there are very strict rules in our policies about what you can and can't do and say. Now, people often don't hear that. They don't realize that the freedom of speech is not speech without limits. There are very strict limits that are there. In fact, in the week that we're recording this, we've just released our most recent community standards enforcement report, which is a quarterly report on how well we are doing at removing harmful content. And to be really clear, we don't want it there. So some of the accusations of does hate speech or harmful content outrage, does that not embolden the business model and strengthen it? I just could not be further from the truth. We don't want it. People don't want it. We know it has a bad experience. Advertisers sure as heck don't want it there, and they want to have the proof points that it's being removed. Now, I just look at an area of hate speech, for example, which has been most prominent in the last couple of years. The last year in particular. If you'd have gone back 2 years ago, the percentage of hate speech that we're taking down proactively, so what are we detecting and removing rather than what's been reporting, was in the low 20s. I believe it was about 24%. Now, in the latest iteration of that, that's in excess of 97% proactive takedown. So that's how much are we getting to and removing. That's one important metric. The other important metric is how common it is, like how reflective of people's experience is content like that. And in the case of hate speech, I believe the number is now 0.05 to 0.06%. And that's down from the last quarter where it was more 0.07 to 0.08. I do just want to caveat, I'm doing those from memory. So if those are out, I apologize now, and I'll make sure I correct them. But they're more or less in the right ballpark. So most people's experience most of the time of using technology, and to be really candid, particularly over the last year, where the importance of how we connect as people through technology has been the only way that we can do it. And do I think it's a dilemma, Richard? No, I don't, because what I see, which is less reported, is the 2 million people that joined a COVID one of the 2000 COVID resilience groups here in the UK within 2 weeks of lockdown, like helping to support each other. I see small businesses, of which there are 2 million using the services in the UK, grow and prosper and thrive, and quite frankly survive the pandemic because they're able to make that pivot into. And then the other aspect I see is just this kind of crazy forced innovation that we've just been through, where watching seeing a minister conduct their service on Facebook Live and reaching out, and I'm really curious as to how many of those things are going to stay and stick over time, and the positive dimensions there. Now, I really get that those positives don't remove the responsibility and the obligation that we've got to make sure we're reducing as best as possible the negative. And we've been putting our money where our mouth is. 35,000 people work on safety and integrity across our platforms now, and we invest more every year now, just in this area, than the entirety of the company's revenues a year that we IPO'd. So I far from a dilemma, I see it as perhaps the words I started with, that tremendous opportunity still to build community and to do good, but also a tremendous responsibility to ensure that that's done in a safe, fair way. Last thing I'll finish on, those are my numbers. Those are Facebook numbers. We just announced yesterday that Ernst & Young are going to audit those numbers so that it's not just us telling us. And also, the regulation that I think we're going to experience over the next couple of years is a really positive thing to be welcomed, because it helps build trust and rules and an understanding that I believe is really important to the continued success and thriving of the digital economy and digital experience that people are having.
So, Steve,
I could go on, you can tell, but I'll try and stop there.
You wouldn't have noticed, but there was just a couple of moments during that, what you shared with us there, where the sun just came out. And when he talks about millions of people joining a movement, so I don't know, everyone can make of that what they will. Maybe the sun shines on the right. let's just go a tiny bit deeper. What strikes me is that Facebook is at the confluence of so many things: liberation, social justice, democracy, echo chambers, hate speech, political elections. Strikes me you can never get it right, and you'll take a lot of flack and a lot of heat, and have to be very careful about what you say at times. So how do you deal with that? Because for me, that sounds like that could lead to sleepless nights, stress, anxiety. So how do you make sense of that jumble?
Yeah, as I said, the responsibilities feel pretty big, and whether you're, but the difference, I think, in my perspective, than probably most people on it, I think maybe there are some Facebookers on this as well, or listening to this, is I get to see the company from the inside. and the degree of expertise and focus and diligence is there. It's absolutely inspiring, Mark. I mean, that's what you want to feel, that when you are looking at these complex challenges, are we doing the right thing? Have we got the right people in the right roles? And are we putting the right amount of effort? And by effort, what I mean is resource, like people and money, behind solving these things when they are, as you say, quite complex often. And having said that, I think when I say complex, most people will just go and solve it. Just go and get these things solved. And I think finding that balance between giving people voice, like enabling people to express themselves in a way that they've never been able to before, connecting communities in a way that they've never been able to before, but doing that in a safe way. It is a big responsibility, Mark, but it's a massive privilege as well. But I could point to incredible experts, whether that's in financial, every single spectrum that you could think of, from financial fraud to election integrity to civil rights, from some of the most prestigious organizations in the world that are joining Facebook for that exact role of how do we fulfill that mission. So it is a responsibility. Do I have, I think more than anything, I have a deep sense of pride of how the company is operating and stepping up to those responsibilities.
Steve, I want to turn the conversation a little bit again back to sort of your leadership on a more personal level. I mean, some of the greatest leaders in the world have had things like dyslexia. Richard Branson is a classic. I would love to get your thoughts on, one, how you see and the perception of that of that condition. And two, how do you think you turn it into a superpower for you to then springboard you into your career and make it work for you?
Yeah, I mean, there's been hiccups on the way, Ritchie, and for me, it's about, it goes to this philosophical point that I said at the beginning, which is of the Facebook culture, play to strengths. Finding peace with those things that I am not good at. And knowing that and having a degree of self-knowledge, and having team and people around me, whether I'm serving them or they're working with me, that's what I'm looking to complement. But just specifically on dyslexia, there are so many things to suggest that dyslexic skills and capabilities are going to be more valuable in the future than than many other attributes that people have. So we're moving from a society where retention of information is less important than interpretation of information, and being able to see the bigger picture, to be able to creatively cut through and draw connections. Machines are going to be doing a lot of the stuff that we don't like doing as people. Well, I say whether we like doing it or not, maybe sometimes we don't have a choice, but machines are really good at simple computation, and that's it. People are incredible at joining up, creating connections, having insight, and building new ideas. And if you look at the skills that employers are seeking, and you map them to dyslexic traits, there's an incredibly strong correlation there. So, but I think your kind of wider question in a way is about vulnerability and experiences and how you take those experiences. And certainly being dyslexic has been a very strong part of my my desire to help kind of other, but also and I've talked publicly about this as well. One of the probably most defining moments of my life is the experience of I took a break between my time at BNP and then joining PhD. I was going to go traveling for a year, and 6 weeks into that, it didn't go as planned, and I experienced an episode of mania, which probably when I was in it took about a year to recover from fully. And in many ways, the most challenging part of that wasn't the experience itself, although it was quite frightening in times, probably more frightening for my friends and family than the way it was for me. But it was the social stigma that was associated with mental health issues that I found the toughest. And again, probably goes back to why I'm a bit more optimistic about the future than I think about it. If I'd have experienced that now and was coming back into the workplace, say, compared to as I was nearly 20 years ago. God, it might even be more. Oh God, I'm old. At that point, I felt I couldn't talk about that, or I couldn't see. And I really regret not being able to do that then. But I don't regret the experience itself, because it certainly, I think, made me not just a better person, but I truly believe a better leader. It made me a better listener. it made me, as I said, I'm white middle-class male. I don't know what it's like to be the other in a minority society, but that gave me some insight into what that might be like. But it also made me realize that if you're able to embrace the kind of fullness of the experience or work in an environment where the fullness of your life can be expressed, oh my God, it's great to see and share and do, and just the energetic connection that can come from that. So I think the broader, whether it's dyslexia or a kind of other forms of kind of life experience where you feel you've had knocks and you've come back from them, or you've learned from them, if you can, adopting a learning mentality, as I think kind of in hindsight is probably what I did, has been the thing that's got me through those. And I hope to be a kind of good advocate for everyone that's kind of feeling that.
Thank you, Steve, for speaking so candidly. I think actually that's another silver lining of this pandemic, is that the mental health conversation has been emancipated. So I do appreciate that. So this last question, my goodness, that's come around quickly. You've achieved a lot, but I suspect you're not done. So what do you want your legacy to be?
Oh my God! I really wish I really struggle with this word. I struggle with the legacy because I just really don't think I've done, and I've got so much to do at the moment. If I'm really honest, but I don't have a grandiose sense of a legacy, but I really would, if I felt that I gave more than I was given, would be, and if I could say that with truth and honesty, and I say, I think I haven't said it before, I do feel incredibly lucky with some of the experiences I have had and some of the fortune and support that I've had, and if I'm able to give a tenth of what I've had back, that would be great. But I kind of hope that I don't want to leave Facebook, so I don't really want to talk about it that way. But what I do hope is that, I've worked with people that feel that when they've come into contact with me, that they've been elevated and that they felt better and they felt more inspired. And certainly that's been the journey for me over this 20-year part of my career, rather than the first part, which is moving from, you mentioned at the start, Mark, I started as a planner, and a planner's an amazing job, right? It is the most privileged job in the world. You get to come on and they're like a set piece player in a football, in an American football game. You get to come on, kick the ball, take the applause, walk off. Leading people is totally different to that, and it's this move from like, look what I did, clever me, to look what they did, clever me, and if I can embolden more people to have more successful and fulfilled careers and lives, then this is the first time I've ever answered the question, so I appreciate it's not as crisp as I'd like it to be, but that would feel really good. Well,
sometimes the unplanned is the best, and to have a legacy where you gave more than you got, or give more than you're given, it's a pretty good answer, in fairness, Steve. So thank you. And just on that note, actually, there's a message here for Keith in the chat. I hid my dyslexia for over 40 years until a note popped up on LinkedIn from you. Wow. I can't thank you enough for indirectly being a brilliant mentor. Very proud to be dyslexic. So Steve, we are out of time. It's been a treasure to have you on for our 40th episode. I'm just going to do a few reflections and then hand to Ritchie for final close. So you talked about a moment of pulling forward and unlock. I think that's a big thought, and it's applied across many things in our worlds. You mentioned the word Tiggerish a couple of times. That certainly came through. We need to know the limits of our optimism. We need to be optimistic, but know the limits. I think we all owe Kathy Jones a favour or a glass of wine or something. Need to take a risk on people, but it's not really a risk. And Kathy's message about encouraging people to fly the nest when they need to soar. Play to strengths, key message of Facebook. I think also true to yourself personally as well. We talked a lot about inclusion, directly and indirectly, and I can see that passion point really comes through. We all need to listen to Jeremy Bullmore's podcast, maybe? I'm not sure. Not sure about that one.
Interesting.
You talked about responsibility a lot as well, but also pride, and being clear on what you're good and not good at. And you talk with great pride around your dyslexia, and I 100% agree with the value that it brings to our society and our work. My sense is that you really enjoy what you do. It hasn't been straight line. You've talked about mental health challenges. You've talked about dyslexia. You've talked about being haunted by not having a degree. But I think it's been really a thrill to hear your thoughts and insights, understand a bit about the person behind the VP of Facebook in Northern Europe, And I think that's a cracking answer. Actually, my final point would be you want to give more than you were given. That's a lovely thought. So I'm going to hand to Ritchie. Before I do, just to say, next Friday we've got Sir Steve Redgrave, our most 5 times Olympic gold winner. Incredible, probably our most heroic. This is for the UK anyway. Most heroic Olympic athlete. But thank you, Steve, and I'll hand over Ritchie for a final close.
Thanks there, Mark. Steve, it's been a tremendous conversation from my point of view. I've learned a huge amount. I really do urge you to actually get out and speak more, particularly to young people, because I think the story around, what you went through in your younger years and how you were able to elevate to where you're at is just, incredible, and would really touch a lot of people at this moment in time. And I think that would be, any ways in which we can help, that would be fantastic. So maybe that's a plug as much for us as it is for you. But I just really think that it's really important, and your story is really inspiring. A couple of key things just for me. I love when you started and talked about the fact that savings were at the highest rate as ever before. And it's so easy for all of us to go into doom and gloom right now. But actually key nuggets of that just kind of made me go, wait a minute. There are certain upsides to where, or how we can kind of look at things half full rather than half empty. And I like that anecdote there. Your thought around the limits of optimism in relation to the ability to always be on the rah-rah mode versus the authentic self, and actually getting that balance right as a leader. Super. You mentioned this term, which stayed with me, was young people create the future. Particularly when I asked you the question around, do you feel positive or negative, or optimistic or negative about the future? And you said young people create the future. And I love that, because actually it's in our hands, as opposed to kind of being something that's being done to us. And I think that's a real takeaway there for me, to kind of think how we can actually, grab it with both hands. The role of mentee mentorship, clearly your personal offering of to never say no when people ask for that broad coffee. Clearly I won't hold you to it, but maybe others will. So, high standards to live up to there, and Mark as well. I'm not letting you off the hook there, Mark. And the final thing I'll just close on was this sort of learning mentality, to never stop learning. And although interestingly, you started out your career as perhaps not having that formalized degree learning, actually what you've taken away is the way to actually succeed is to constantly throughout that career is to really have that learning feel and environment, to constantly be doing and upskilling your own skills, so then you can help others. Steve, it's just been an absolute pleasure, really, and I could have gone on and on.
Ritchie, Mark, thank you so much. It's been a real privilege. I feel very humbled to be part of this. I didn't realize it was your 40th, and congratulations on that as well. And I'll certainly be keeping on my listening on the podcast. And I just wish the show and the kind of School of Marketing huge continued success. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Just before we close up, everyone, just for a last keynote, next week is one of those weeks where we've actually got a double whammy. And what do I mean by that is that we've got an extraordinary guest coming on the Thursday evening at 6 p.m. So clearly it's a bit of a deviation from our normal time, but please do be with us. This is a really cool one that's to come. I've got the real pleasure of announcing that we've got Seth Godin coming on the show, a real legend, guru in the marketing space, clearly one of the most renowned, and definitely needs no introduction by any of us. But he's going to come on to share some of his key highlights, his career journey. And what I love about Seth is as we were ushering him to try and convince him to come on, he said, look, I'm just an ordinary guy that's done some really extraordinary things. And that really sums Seth up in so many ways. And he really wants to bring that to life, that all of us have the power to do tremendous things. So please do join us next Thursday, 6 p.m. GMT, UK time. So wherever you are in the world, adjust your clocks to that moment. It'll be an evening worth spent. So thank you very much, and see you all soon.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Steve. Good weekends all.